Ever since Saddam Hussein came to power in Iraq in 1979, the Iraqi political and social climate began to take a turn. This turn was not in a very positive direction. Quite the contrary. This turn was on the whole mostly negative. Saddam was a brutal tyrant who ruled the Iraqi people with an iron fist, a hallmark of a brutal and psychopathic dictator. Saddam was not someone to be messed with, and he displayed this very clearly and bluntly in the so-called Purge of 1979, when he got rid of what he considered traitors of the Iraqi nation, code for people who didn't like or just disagreed with him, even if it was mild and reasonable. He displayed a side of his personality that we don't encounter in day-to-day life. Someone who is completely devoid of compassion and emotion. And when he does show emotion, it's oftentimes very unnatural and scripted. Psychopaths are very good at this since they don't experience the same level of empathy the general population does. This was one of the things that catalyzed Iraq into a society of terror, not initially to outsiders, but to those within its borders. Saddam further cemented his view in the public eye through his campaign against Iran in 1980, when he used chemical weapons against the Iranians and even his own people. This useless war lasted for 8 years, until 1988. At that time, Iraq was becoming more exhausted and lower on fuel, not the literal fuel, but the morale and economic means to continue a war. Saddam had ambitions for having nuclear weapons, but it was too late because the project was terminated prematurely via airstrikes from the Israeli Air Force. At that time, Saddam desired to nuke Israel, and so Israel took proper measures to get rid of Saddam's potential for nuclear capabilities before it was fully realized. Fast forward to 1990, Iraq wanted to annex Kuwait because he, Saddam, claimed it was part of Iraq, a claim that is actually true, by the way. So he invaded Kuwait in order to enforce this annexation, which prompted the United States to get involved in the Middle East, specifically in Iraq, in the Gulf War of 1990 to 1991. This set the stage for the empowerment of a group called Al Qaeda, a terrorist organization which eventually committed horrible crimes against the United States, including the infamous 9/11 attacks in 2001. When the planes crashed into those Twin Towers, we knew immediately that we are at war with Al Qaeda. After the US declared war on Iraq in 2003, the hunt for Saddam Hussein began. Eventually, he was caught in 2006, where he was hiding in a hole in the ground. He was tried, convicted, and hanged. Despite all the efforts the US has put in, democracy was not something that was looming over Iraq anytime soon. Widespread corruption and power grabs began to split the country apart. In 2014 to 2016, a group more radical than Al Qaeda, named ISIS, which stands for Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, or Syria, took over large parts of Iraq and Syria. They subjugated the population and drove many to exile. They committed horrible crimes against humanity and were eventually defeated when the Trump administration used airstrikes to reduce their capabilities. Obama was the one who started these airstrikes, and Trump just finished them. So given this information so far, why do I think the US lost the war in Iraq? Well, these are just my own opinions, not a professional analysis by a political scientist or historian. My field is psychology, so I will tackle this through this lens more or less. When you look at the physical aspects of this conflict, you can objectively measure U.S. military victory through things like completely decimating the Iraqi army, destroying tanks and aircrafts, bombing important military sites, all of which contributed to the rapid downfall of the Iraqi military. Even though the US was apprehensive at first, given the number of soldiers in the Iraqi army, it was not a serious challenge since most ran away from the fight and were only conscripts instead of professional soldiers, which is what the US military mainly consisted of. This is where quality matters more than quantity. So the number of soldiers in the Iraqi army was irrelevant when compared to the quality of the US military. However, I don't think this is all there is to it. Even though militarily the US won the battle, I'd argue that the war is still raging on. We are, in a sense, still at war with Iraq, but not necessarily the government itself. We are at war with the ideas, the culture, the belief system, a kind of soft Cold War. The ideas we espouse here in America are totally different from the ones the Iraqis espouse, regardless of their ethnic and religious backgrounds. Though, of course, there are differences of opinion between these groups, on the whole, the culture and mentality of people in Iraq is very different from our culture here in the US. It is to this that I attribute our continuing war with them, despite all the advanced intelligence that the CIA has. It seems simply incapable of penetrating the Middle Eastern mindset. It's almost as if we're trying to read an infinitely encrypted message that simply can't be deciphered unless one is able to live among the people who have made this message. Cultural differences can oftentimes be a big reason why civilizations clash. A difference in the way two populations think can cause a lot of friction, and most people aren't very comfortable with differences initially, especially big ones. Despite all the progress made, humans are territorial by nature and want to preserve what is theirs, which includes culture. In order for one culture to understand that it needs to develop, the last thing it needs is some foreign invader who will impose its values on it. This has been the case throughout history, and it is one reason why I believe, despite all the advancements made by the US, Iraq will never change unless its people see the necessity of doing so. And even then, I don't think they would copy the US's way of doing things 100%, even if they do appreciate a lot of the technological advances we enjoy here. So that's it for this video. If you like this content, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, and share to get notified about more videos like this one. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.